So what would you do?
Nothing.
I think that the judge did the right thing in this case.
The reality of how we're judged is often by how people report our students' academic performance.
Yeah, can you do that to a little baby?
Hello. Welcome to the King 5 Investigators January Spotlight. I'm Chris Ingalls. With your help, your tips, we uncover fraud, waste, abuse, and injustice in our community. We're bringing you these stories in a monthly roundup with investigations that get results. First up, we expose a multi-million-dollar case of alleged fraud on the Hanford nuclear reservation. Susanna Frame reports the Department of Justice accused one of the site's biggest contractors of billing the government for work that wasn't done, putting the environment, the workforce, and the public at risk.
Here on his Kennewick property, Bradley Keever goes nonstop.
This is just my little makeshift shop. So here's a small one, Grandpa's old tractor. I just got it running again. This roasts my coffee. This building right here is going to be turning into my meat packing room. This is where the roasting happens. On this side of the building, I'm putting a recording studio in. I built this from nothing.
You'd have a tough time finding anyone busier, unless you saw him at work.
We are begging for work. I can't believe I get paid to do this, to do nothing.
Keever is a pipe fitter at Hanford on the fire protection maintenance team. That's him on the right at the work site. It's their job to make sure pipes, sprinklers, and alarms are ready to go in case of a fire. It's an essential task. Hanford is the most contaminated work site in America. For decades, it's where they produce plutonium for the country's nuclear weapons program. It left behind millions of gallons of radioactive waste, hundreds of contaminated buildings, and toxic soil.
It's hard to think of a place in the state of Washington where having fire systems ready to go at a moment's notice would be more essential.
We're both working at Hanford.
But when Keever got to Hanford's fire safety team 7 years ago, he couldn't believe the sluggish pace. He says his employer, government contractor HMIS, gave them little to do, but instructed them to charge the government for full 10-hour days of work.
So what would you do?
Read, watch Netflix. Nothing.
And how did you feel about doing that?
I thought it was insane.
According to a suit filed by the DOJ, HMIS's failure to appropriately plan and schedule work, they regularly engage in a fraudulent time card scheme designed to fleece the Department of Energy.
It is lying, it is cheating, it is stealing. We're stealing from the taxpayers. I mean, our taxes are outrageous. Why pay a company to have their guys sit around?
Some examples include a manager writing workers who did not have a job assignment for the day were to charge for a full day of training. 2 workers charged 2 hours apiece for a job they detailed took from 9 a.m. to 9:14, 14 minutes, not 2 hours. Another worker charged for a full 10 hours of work on a day he spent in front of a screen. Watching the 90s rom-com, There's Something About Mary.
I think it's extremely unfair to the taxpayer. The big thing is to clean up this waste, and knowing that this money is allocated to do that and it's not being utilized for that, it's quite depressing.
While the money was rolling into HMIS for fire safety work, federal regulators found massive gaps in maintenance, including federally required pipe inspections that had not been performed in many years.
A fire is one of, if not the most likely emergency scenario out at Hanford that could spread chemical and radioactive waste far and wide. And so to not know the status of every single fire system at Hanford was terrifying.
I was just attracted to the safety on fire as I got older.
For Brad Keever, this work is personal. At the age of 9, after lantern fuel spilled on his leg, a friend lit a lighter.
So I have about 20% third-degree burns throughout my body.
5 decades later, the scars are still there, a reminder of the importance of being ready for a fire, exactly what he wants to do for people and the environment at Hanford.
We don't want that reputation of being the lazy Hanford worker that doesn't want to do anything. We're forced to be that lazy Hanford worker. We have very highly skilled craftsmen that are ready and are begging just to work.
For years, the King 5 investigators have reported on injustice at Washington state jails, all of which operate without oversight. Now, a Washington lawmaker has a plan to turn that around. As Taylor Mirfendereski reports, under the new bill, local jails would face statewide scrutiny for the first time in nearly 40 years.
Our jails are not adequate.
Local jails across Washington are among the only institutions in the state with no one looking over them. Jail experts say it comes at a cost. The state has one of the highest death rates of local jail inmates in the entire country, but Washington has no mandatory jail standards. It's up to jails to police themselves.
It's not working. There's an incentive to cover things up. It's really about looking at how to change the system so that these cases don't repeat.
State Senator Rebecca Saldana thinks it's time to bring back a jail oversight board, something the state hasn't had for 4 decades.
If we don't do this, it's only going to get worse.
This month, she dropped legislation that would create an independent body inside the governor's office, one that would come up with uniform jail standards and investigate problems affecting inmates, just like the issues the King 5 investigators found in jails across the state. In 2022, we showed at the Forks Jail in Clallam County, a jail guard sexually abused multiple women he was supposed to be protecting. And in rural Garfield County, in this dilapidated basement jail, an inmate took his own life, but his body wasn't discovered for more than 18 hours. We also found multiple jails using unqualified medical staff to treat inmates, like Javier Tapia, who lost his leg at the Pierce County Jail after a life-threatening infection when undiagnosed.
I feel they still took some of my freedom from me, leaving me in this state.
It is exactly what we're trying to prevent.
States in more than half the country currently have independent oversight of local jails, and Washington used to be among them.
We could see we had made this progress.
In the 70s and 80s, Bill Collins of Olympia helped the state create a jail oversight body with the authority to drive change behind bars.
It was improving jail operations, adding a level of professionalism. Here's one filed in 1981.
More than 40 years later, he still has copies of the first statewide jail standards.
Well, here's a standard. It talks about access to health care training.
Bruce Kennan, who now lives in Virginia, was responsible for enforcing them.
There's probably nobody that has been in as many jails in Washington as I have.
He was one of 2 people tasked with inspecting every local jail in the state and made recommendations to the state board when he found violations.
Yeah, I've been in favor of that coming back for a long time. A little surprised it's taken this long. Oh, there was major change in the jail operations from before and after.
His findings during a Pacific County jail inspection still stick with him to this day.
They literally had no staff. They literally just closed the doors at night and hoped that everybody was okay in the morning.
In 1987, the state legislature nixed the commission and required city and county jails to adopt whatever standards they saw fit.
We all had the feeling if you take away that agency with a hammer, things are going to start to slide backwards. And they did.
There are more than 50 local jails in Washington, and the largest one is in King County.
I think it's long overdue. And
Director Alan Nance says he's in favor of the proposal to bring back jail oversight and standards.
When there is an absence of that level of consistency, the experience of people in custody suffers. And we can do better than that. And we should do better than that.
He's not the only one who thinks so. The leaders of 8 jails across Washington told us they would support mandatory jail standards, but the state would have to pay for them.
That's a very real thing, and it does require an investment of resources. There really is a need to have legislative support.
Senator Saldana says she intends for local governments and the state to share the expense, but there are a lot of improvements that don't cost a thing.
Well, not all standards are expensive. There's work that can be done already to improve the quality of care. Everything that's happening right now, for the most part, has been preventable.
When a similar bill was proposed in the 2024 session, it didn't pass. Saldana is hoping to get more buy-in this time around when lawmakers reconvene in January. In the newsroom, Taylor Mirfendereski, King 5 News.
It's hectic.
Plus, a King 5 investigation reveals why school kids are having to rush through meals.
You're welcome.
A King 5 survey found many Western Washington school districts have lunch periods that are too short. Experts say you can't feed kids' minds if you don't feed their stomachs. Now, here's my latest report on the school lunch crunch and one school district that's getting creative to make longer lunch times and to promote better learning.
Okay, so I'm pretty much ready to go. Still needs a few more minutes.
It's 15 minutes before lunch, and cook Sue Wozniak is already spooning food into trays under a heat lamp.
It does save a couple of seconds, which is really helpful.
It's a head start before the first students
Calm before the storm.
arrive for lunch period number 1.
Okay, you can come in. Hey.
Now, Sue speaks the line that she'll say hundreds of times today.
Do you want mashed potato and gravy? Mashed potato, no gravy?
Over 6 lunch periods at Blaine Elementary School in Whatcom County.
Do you want mashed potato and gravy? Do you want mashed potatoes and gravy?
This method behind the lunchroom madness
Every second counts.
gives kids the maximum amount of time in their seat eating their food.
We want them to eat their fruits and vegetables, so we want to give them plenty of time to chew.
Nutrition Director Brenda Bowles says finding time in the schedule is the part that's hard to swallow.
So I want them to have as long as they need, but I also recognize that that's a challenge.
Especially for elementary schools, where a new state rule requires a half hour a day for recess in addition to academic requirements.
It's a scheduling nightmare.
Also, increased use of free and reduced price breakfasts and lunches means longer lines and shorter seat time.
It's hectic, not gonna lie. It is hectic.
In a King 5 survey of 31 school districts, Blaine was one of only 5 that had lunch periods of at least 25 minutes at all of its schools. 19 districts have schools with 20-minute lunch periods, mostly at the elementary level, and 2 districts, Stanwood, Camano, and Everett, have at least one school with a lunch that's just 15 minutes long.
We want to make sure that kids are eating as much of their healthy meals as possible.
Dr. Juliana Cohen researches lunch time and nutrition, using stopwatches to measure how long kids actually sit and eat and what's left on their trays. She says those common 20-minute lunch periods aren't enough.
When kids had more time to eat, especially when they had at least 25 minutes of seated time in the cafeteria, kids ate significantly more of their meals.
At Blaine Elementary, administrators eked out a 25-minute lunch period. That required a state waiver that allowed them to break each class's recess into 2 15-minute sessions so they could fit into a jigsaw puzzle of a schedule. Next door at Blaine Primary, which schools kindergartners through 2nd grade, more creative scheduling.
Have we had this before? No.
Lunch is 30 minutes, in which kids load up their trays at a small kitchen and return to the classroom to eat. What's the difference that you notice when kids have 30 minutes?
They take longer to eat. The atmosphere is relaxed. When they transition back into learning time, they can still be finishing up and munching on the last carrot.
Dr. Cohen urges administrators to find time in their current schedules for a 30-minute lunch.
There are going to be maybe 5 minutes less of English, 5 minutes less of math perhaps. But we're hearing from teachers is that the students are better learners.
Where do you get minutes from? And I think that's something that all schools are probably challenged with in different ways.
The superintendent of Blaine Schools says lengthening lunch with a bite out of math or science poses risks to all-important test scores.
The reality of how we're judged is often by how people report our students' academic performance on school report cards across the state and federal accountability. I think teachers are always looking for more time with students.
Next year, the state will not allow recess or PE waivers, so Blaine will lose scheduling options, and it may be forced into the 20-minute lunch periods it's tried so hard to avoid. Why do you make that face?
That's going to be tough.
Yeah.
And we're in the exact same boat as all the other districts.
Have to find a way to speed up because timing is everything.
In a surprise move, a U.S. District Court judge rejected Boeing's plea deal with the U.S. Department of Justice related to the deaths of hundreds of passengers killed in 2 737 MAX crashes. The judge says the agreement fails to provide enough oversight for the troubled aerospace giant. Here's King 5's Kristen Goodwillie.
It's been 5 months since Boeing pleaded guilty to conspiracy to defraud the federal government after allegedly violating an agreement related to the 2 737 MAX crashes that killed 346 people. In that plea agreement, Boeing admitted to deceiving the FAA over a critical software system, which led to incomplete pilot training. Now, U.S. District Court Judge Reed O'Connor has rejected that deal, meaning Boeing can be prosecuted.
I think that the judge did the right thing in this case. I think that justice is being served here.
Justice is what Nadia Milaron has spent 5 years trying to get for her daughter who died in the 2019 Ethiopian Airlines crash.
For the first time, the families truly feel that they are being heard and that they have a voice.
Judge O'Connor provided 2 reasons for rejecting this deal, and both have to do with Boeing's oversight, or its independent monitor. Judge O'Connor took issue with Boeing's diversity and equity policies, saying the monitor selection should be done solely on competency. He also said that the courts need to be involved in this oversight.
In other words, the judge wants to keep his eye on Boeing.
Attorneys Mark Lindquist and Robert Clifford see this move as a win, but aviation analyst John Nance says he was startled by this response.
What I question is whether or not this should have ever been a matter in federal court involving criminal law to begin with. I've always felt that this was a gross overreach by the Justice Department.
Boeing and the Department of Justice now have 30 days to update the court with how they plan to proceed. I reached out to Boeing for a statement and haven't heard back. And while technically this could go to trial, none of the experts I spoke with believe that will happen. They tell me the likely outcome will be a plea deal. I'm Kristen Goodwillie, King 5 News.
We'll be right back after this. The King 5 investigators expose a controversial solution to the rising numbers of children accidentally overdosing on drugs. They're giving parents who use illicit drugs a lockbox. It's supposed to keep children safe from drugs like fentanyl. But as Kristen Goodwillie reports in her series, The Cost of Keeping Families Together, child welfare advocates say it isn't working.
Well, and here I have the kids' school records.
Danielle Steele of North Bend has spent the last 10 years gathering evidence, trying to prove she should get custody of her 2 nieces and a nephew, while her sister, the kid's mother, goes to treatment. She says records of fractured bones, burns, and long stretches of missed school days show the kids are in danger.
Showing my nephew missing 52.99 days of school. You did it!
Danielle says an incident in the fall should have been the parents' last chance. Court records show her 3-year-old niece overdosed on tranquilizers. CPS did not take the children away.
No, they did not, because they said that they did not have enough evidence.
While CPS didn't remove the kids from the home, they did give the family a tool aimed at keeping the home safe. A lockbox.
I mean, that is a joke.
The King 5 investigators found early last year, DCYF started giving parents who use drugs like fentanyl lockboxes like this one. And the goal is to keep drugs out of reach so kids don't accidentally eat the pills or powder. But child welfare advocates say that these lockboxes do not account for the highly toxic nature of fentanyl.
That is a true joke, and it's sad. It's so much bigger than that. It's so much bigger than a lockbox.
Even with a lockbox in the home, another crisis happened. 3 weeks ago, Danielle says the kids got their hands on drugs lying around the house.
The kids started getting into it. That's how they found it. And
none of it in a lockbox.
None of it in a lockbox, yeah.
Houses nowadays.
In November, we reported on a law passed in 2021 aimed at keeping more kids with their parents. We found since then, more children in the state system are dying. State records show in the last 4 years, the number of kids in foster care has plummeted, down 28%. But deaths and near deaths of children involved with CPS went up by 114%.
It's so much more than just a lockbox.
Do you think that you guys are doing this safely?
Yes.
Doreen Perez is an official with the state agency charged with keeping children safe, DCYF.
We certainly think that this is an opportunity to prevent harm. If it's not being provided, then there's no opportunity. And without that, there's no opportunity to try and keep them safe.
DCYF uses several tools to keep kids safe. Services like offering treatment to parents, housing, childcare, parenting classes, social worker visits, and in the last year, a lockbox. Despite these safety nets, kids have suffered dire consequences.
This one right there, he's just beautiful. He's perfect.
Pamela Andrews of Port Townsend took in baby Otis after he was born last Christmas with fentanyl in his system. The CPS safety plan called for the mom to go into treatment and the father to move in with Pamela.
But I should have done more.
But what could you have done?
Ran away with him.
Otis's father was given a lockbox and required to do a weekly urine analysis, but Pamela says it wasn't enough. State and police records show Pamela called CPS repeatedly about the father using drugs, buying urine to fake drug tests, and muffling the child's mouth when he was crying.
Aren't you supposed to do anything and everything? I mean, to try to save them? I mean, I don't understand where that fine line is for them. Why didn't you do something? Why?
Less than 3 weeks after the state decided the father could get custody of him, Otis was found dead. He was in his car seat, left in a bush on a nature reserve. He had meth in his system. Detectives found drugs and paraphernalia on the father. None of it was in the lockbox.
It's beyond heartbreaking. How can you do that to someone? And he deserves so much more.
King 5 spoke to 24 child welfare advocates who were all surprised these lockboxes are part of a safety plan, especially given the death toll associated with fentanyl. From prosecutors,
their solution to that problem is to provide a lockbox as opposed to taking the kid out of the house. That is shocking.
To social workers.
We can't expect a parent who's actively using multiple times a day to remember to safely store their drugs.
Even a mother in recovery and currently using a lockbox says it would be hard to use while on fentanyl.
But like when it comes to fentanyl, per se, and that type of drugs, and like I would have to say, no, they're not good enough because they aren't always used properly.
I have to get them things because their mom can't get them together.
Danielle Steele, whose niece overdosed on drugs last year, says the kids are still living with the parents. She's constantly worried, even with a lockbox.
Children have rights too. They should have rights. And they should have somebody who's looking after them when the parents are not doing it.
And that's it for the King 5 Investigators January Spotlight. We'll be back next month with more investigations. In the meantime, if you have a tip for us, email us at investigators@king5.com or scan the code on your screen. I'm Chris Ingalls. On behalf of all the King 5 investigators, thanks for watching.